Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Covering both sides of the big issues with the analysis you trust on News Radio 1040 WHO.
75% of executives say most of the recent college grads, you are not one yet,
Not yet.
that they hired were unsuccessful.
Well, I've always beaten the odds, so...
I love that about you. So we're going to be joined by Scott Allen Curley. He is an expert on mindset and resilience, and I just have a sneaking feeling, Will, he will have loved your answer just there. Scott, you're very welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Simon?
I am living the dream, baby, every single day. They pay me for flapping my gums. I mean, it's crazy, really. So you heard Will then. He likes beating the odds. My producer is 22 and is in his senior year at Drake. And I'm sure he's going to do very, very well. I am. But 75% of executives felt most of their recent college grads that they hired were unsuccessful.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, and it's unfortunate. It's a mindset issue. It's a generational issue. It's an information age issue. There's so many factors that play into that fact, which is a fact.
So, I mean, they're saying 60% of these graduates had to be fired.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We could take up a whole episode, which I'm sure I only have a few minutes to chat
No,
about.
you're okay. We got a good 10 minutes here. You're fine. Just relax. Pour a glass of wine, put your feet up. We'll be fine.
I already did it. Well, if you don't mind, do you mind if I jump in and just tell you my take on that? And
sure.
I do run a few different
That's
companies.
why you're on, man.
All right. Well, here's the challenge that young people face. First of all, to their credit, they are a big part of the information age. The young people, Gen Z, I believe we're calling them now. They are exposed to more information than we have ever been exposed to in the history of the world, ever. The information that at the tips of our fingers is just immeasurable. Now, along with that comes social media, which is a double-edged sword. And like any other quote-unquote addiction, social media is extremely addictive, especially to young people, because that's all they know. They were raised in the social media age, and what they have come to believe about their own existence is that they cannot exist and function without having access to it. So what happens is, and I've experienced it so many times in my own businesses, and I own four, that young people come in, and it's very difficult for us to, and I say us, our organizational leaders, to get them to detach from their gadgets, from their devices, from social media, in order to focus on the task at hand. And that has become a very serious issue when you're working in an organization that is performance driven, that is production driven. It's just social media just in many cases does not fit in with the organizational objectives per se. And that's been a big issue. We've had a lot of young people who right out of college who have even in the interview process have asked or even demanded that they're allowed to have their phones on their desk while they are performing their work duties. And it's just a bizarre dynamic, but it's a real dynamic, and that is one of the hard truths that it makes it very difficult for companies like ours and leaders of companies like me to be open and receptive to young people coming in and expecting them to perform at full function, at optimal levels, because they're hindered and they're handicapped by their need for being engaged on social media and engaged with their devices.
That's a terrible indictment of social media. I don't disagree with you, by the way. It's just a terrible indictment. And here's something that's interesting as well, because schools now increasingly are looking to ban these devices completely on school premises. There's varying degrees of this depending on where in the country that you are, but I can tell you that this whole thing started back in England. And
interesting.
It really is. And the number one change that they first noted, which is truly fascinating to me, is the volume went up. So the volume in the corridors went up when they were, moving from one class to another. The volume in the lunchroom went up because these
that's where
kids
they were allowed to use their devices.
No, they weren't. No, they were having to talk to each other. That's why the volume. Okay. They weren't allowed to have these devices in school at all.
Wow.
They were banned completely, and so these kids had no choice but to talk to each other, which sounds like alien to me. Because of the, when I grew up back in the Stone Ages, we didn't have these. We didn't have these things, so talking to each other was normal. So was getting home from school, grabbing a soccer ball. Sorry, I hate calling it that. It really is a football. And going on our bikes down to the park and playing soccer until it got dark.
Right.
And that was my growing up.
And mine as well. I'm sure we were in the same generation.
There you go.
Late 50s. Yes, absolutely.
All right. So the problem is for these kids is social media, and that's why it's not working out.
That's a big problem. There's another problem as well that, and I have to say this very delicately because I'm a very strong proponent of formal education. I think it's wonderful, but at the same time, I think higher education institutions need to be a little bit more honest with the students. I feel like, and I'm going to say this very delicately, but I have to be honest. I feel like they sell these young people a bill of goods, and what I mean by that is, you see a kid 18 years old and he goes to college and he graduates at 22 and he gets a BBA, a business degree. They're being taught, and I know this for a fact because I have kids who graduated, and I actually got mine 100 years ago, and I know what I was taught and told, that once you graduate, you get your bachelor's of business or whatever you got your degree in, you are automatically eligible for a position in mid-management at a Fortune 500 company. And these kids, these young adults come into these interviews entitled, expecting to be offered that six-figure income because they have that degree. And they don't understand that that's simply what got you the interview. But unfortunately the colleges, and this is not a broad indictment on all colleges, but I have seen it so much that the institutions in many cases tend to say or even allude to these students that is going to be their reality, and it's simply not. The problem, they realize that then real life hits them, and then they don't want to accept reality.
The problem with colleges, you can stem back to when government got involved in loans, because then they thought, ooh, we're definitely getting paid. Let's bring out some basket weaving degrees, because, you can get college credit in Taylor Swift now. You really can. I'm not just using it as an example. It's out there. You really can. Of course, you have to pay for that course. It's insanity. And these young people, almost call them kids, showing my age, these young people are getting ripped off. And it's horrible to see it. That is what's happening. And so many of them are leaving university with like $100,000 of debt, and they only qualify for a $30,000 job.
Yes, and on top of it, they disadvantage themselves unintentionally, of course, with a sense of entitlement.
Oh yes,
because they've been taught that, and told rather, that this is what they deserve, what they should expect. It's very unfortunate, and it's very unfair.
Absolutely right. Fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us today. We're talking to Scott Allen Curley. and he is. Let me just pull him up right here.
Many things.
Oh, hang on. I went to the wrong one. Man, just hang on. I'll get this right. Good grief, Simon. Scott, tell everybody how they can get hold of you. Why don't
Well,
you?
you can find me on ScottAllenCurley.com. I did author a book called Absolution, The Dark Path to Light. So I kind of went through the school of hard knocks. I had a lot of troubles growing up, went to actually prison for 10 years. Just had a really tough upbringing and, had a mindset shift about 25 years ago and decided that I just want to live and do differently. Just because I was in that situation, I chose not to be of it anymore, and decided to do things differently.
Well, I'm glad you found a way out. The book is called Absolution, The Dark Path to Light, and you can find out more about Scott at Scott Allen, that's 2 L's and an E, Scott Allen Curley, CURLEY.com. Scott, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you. Interesting conversation, to say the least.
Thank you so much for having me, Simon.
You take care. We'll talk again.